I'm Frank Vaughn. It's July 4th, 2025. Happy Independence Day to my American audience. Yesterday's video and the subject matter didn't land well with some people. The majority seemed to accept it, but some wrote some emails, which I responded to, with my usual question, which is, how many kids do you have? If you're so concerned about replacement and demographics, how many kids do you have? But I'm going to admit, having babies today doesn't solve today's problems. It solves problems 20 years down the road. I don't even know if it solves those problems 20 years down the road. So first, before I even talk about what's happening on the screen, I've been thinking about this all night. I got barely 4 hours sleep last night. My kid was rocking a fever. I was camping out with him. So that was part of the reason I was awake. But the main reason I was awake is I've been rolling this over since yesterday's video, trying to think about how to communicate such a diverse amount of information. Forgive me for using the word diverse. I know it's a trigger word these days. So maybe the best way is to start out with where I think we all agree. There's too much immigration in Canada. Mass immigration is failing us. We're not doing it right. We don't apply immigration standards. We don't have language standards. We don't have conduct standards. We don't have penalties that if somebody comes into the country and breaks our laws, they get automatically deported. We allow criminals to come in. We're learning that now, as has been reported this week in the news. We're bringing in people who are disabled. Yeah. People who can't even contribute to the economy. They come in and they become dependents within 6 months sometimes. There's a lot of things we're doing wrong in our immigration system, and I think everybody, from the zero immigration folks to the people who are advocates of continuing the 500,000 a year, I think we can all agree that there's a problem. I think it's even mainstream. In mainstream politics, Pierre Poilievre talked about the problem of immigration in his own limited way. I'm not defending anybody. The second thing is, oftentimes it's a mistake to talk in absolutes. I've said that a lot on my channel. There's certain things I do talk about in absolutes, like the nature of our system, the nature of federalism in Canada sucking bad. That's an absolute. I can't think of a good thing to say about it. To be honest, I really can't. That's another thing I've been thinking about. It's like, what's good about the Canadian system of governance at the federal level, and I can't come up with a damn thing. It's terrible by modern standards. Another absolute is that the constitutional republic to our south is a much better design than what we have as a system. Another absolute is that the American market is irreplaceable for our trade purposes. But in general, absolutes are limited. And when it comes to the issue of immigration and demographics, the issue is so nuanced. There's so much to it that anybody who tells you that there's one single sweeping statement that captures the entirety of the problem or captures the entirety of the solution is either delusional themselves or misled or desperate for some kind of narrative to hang on to, whether it's the people who want to just deport every single brown person or the people who just want to continue with things the way that they are. So I hope you stick with me. This isn't going to be a highly technical conversation because most of it's in my head. I thought I could show you all these different charts and everything else, but they're irrelevant to the conversation because we just need to face a bunch of interwoven facts to understand that we are, this chart, let's finally get to this. This has been playing on loop. This is our demographics. You note how by 2020, it looks like a fat man with man tits. That's what it looks like by the time we get there. This is a very unhealthy demographic setup. This demography is shared not just by about every single nation in the West. It's a Chinese problem. It's a Korean problem. It's a Japanese problem. There's very few places in the world outside of Arabia and East Asia and Africa. That's basically it. That's basically it. Nigeria, India, some parts of the Arab world, because their demographics are shrinking too, everybody's going to end up having this exact same problem because for whatever reason, everybody stopped having babies. Even the fertility rate in Bangladesh is collapsing. It's not a crisis yet because they have so many people, but people die. The population expires, it ages. The story of this chart is that big surge that you see is the baby boomers moving through time, but it's not the boomers that I would focus on at this point, because my main thesis here is that we are already 4 decades into a demographic crisis. This isn't something we're coming into, because a lot of the language that we have surrounding this is that we're coming into it. We're already well advanced. We're already well into it. The baby boomers were a big generation. Lots of the silent generation had a lot of children. And then from that point forward, people stopped having babies. And we are faced with a boomer generation that is really committed to its entitlements. They want all of their social safety nets. They want their taxpayer-funded pensions. They want their health care. It's the number one concern. Whenever I make a video talking about integration with the United States, I inevitably get people in the 65-plus age group who are just like, what happens to my health care? What happens to my old age pension? That's the main concern on their mind, and I think it's interesting and instructive that they carry a lot of clout when it comes to voting. They have, and I'm speaking in general, this isn't going to go for everybody. So like, I don't want to have to do a preamble every time I say something, okay? There's going to be individuals, there's going to be individual segments, there's going to be millions of people who think different from one another. I have to speak in generalization so that we can just have a simple conversation. If it doesn't describe you, then it doesn't describe you. I'm not trying to label anybody. I'm trying to speak in generalizations. The boomer generation, which has the least amount of time left on Earth, is demanding the most financially for that time that they have left. And the burden, because there's this idea that we worked hard and we paid for it. That's not what happened. You worked hard, for sure. Many of you did. You paid for your lives and you did things, and it's, beautiful. It's not just boomers. It's also people who are in their 40s and the 90s. Like, that's another thing. Somebody who was working age between 30 and 40 in the 1990s is now exiting the workforce or reaching their maximum maturity. These are not boomers. These are a different generation set. You're coming into a different generation. If you were 20 in the 1990s, you're not a boomer. Okay, so like categorizing everybody as boomers doesn't really work, because now Generation X is starting to leave the workforce too. They're starting to get to that age. You worked hard, you paid taxes, you paid into all of these things. But your government squandered your money. So, and even if they hadn't squandered it, it wasn't enough for all the entitlements. So those entitlements aren't paid for. But it's the primary concern that older generation is thinking about, and it's that primary concern that they vote. That's why they vote Liberal, because the Liberals are promising them everything to keep everything kosher. Okay, fine. You feel you're entitled to it. That generation feels they're entitled to it. Fine, I understand. How do you pay for all of those entitlements when you have this thing that we're dealing with here? And the answer is immigration. That's how you keep the economy growing and moving forward, is you have to mass immigrate your way out of it. Now, we're doing too much, that's for sure. But if you want to maintain the economy, you have to have immigration. Otherwise, things start falling apart. And you can see the evidence for this yourself anywhere you go in the country. So even here in rural Saskatchewan, I was in a small town. I've had cause to be in town for a couple days this week. And while I was there, I counted East Indians. I went into various businesses while I was waiting for things to happen and figured out who owned what. And I just did some on-the-ground research. And so many businesses are not just owned, but operated by East Indians. fast food joints, A&W, Dairy Queen, a new restaurant that just opened up, 5 East Indians that I could count were working in there. You go to the grocery store, maybe a third of the staff is East Indian. I went to another grocery store. There was at least one working there. It was predominantly natives and white Europeans, but there was an East Indian working there too. Any of the truck traffic that's not farm related, all the farm related traffic is pretty much driven by white Europeans. And I'm being general here, I'm just speaking. But all of the shipping traffic, the main shipping traffic, it's East Indian. There's East Indians everywhere. So let's deport them all, okay? Let's assume that we're going to deport them all. Who's going to do all those things? And you might think this is a misnomer. It's not. It's not a misnomer at all, because the demography. Let's get out of this. Actually, let's go back to the wiki article, and I know it's Wikipedia. You can't rely on it. Well, it's pretty reliable when it comes to compiling and copying statistics that are compiled by StatsCan. If anything, it's low. We are now at. Where's the birth rate? 1.26 children born per woman. That's the 2023 estimate. It's only lower from there. A visceral example of this is South Korea, because they are not mass immigrating their way out of their problems. It's like Japan. Japan is not mass immigrating their way out of their problems. And what's going to happen to the South Korean population is there's going to be no South Korea in 80 to 100 years. There'll literally only be 1 million or 2 million South Koreans on the current trajectory. I don't think that trajectory is going to last, but I mean, Canada's in the similar boat. People stopped having babies. 40, 50, 60 years ago, they stopped having babies. They're not growing up. They're not entering the workforce. So in order for the boomers and for the Gen Xers who are starting to exit the workforce to get their entitlements, the economy has to keep moving. And no politician wants to tell you the bad news, which is you may not like mass immigration. You may not like immigration in general. But if you expect your entitlements and you don't want to completely restructure society, immigration is the only way to do it. And you can't get immigration from Europe, from other European nations, because they've got the same demographic problem. The young people just aren't there because we didn't make them 30, 40 years ago. They're not there. So there is a world where you can deport everybody. Deport all the brown skins. That's what they're more commonly called. Deport them all. Get them out. Okay, you get them out. All of these businesses, all of these services that are run by them. Now, people will say, too, youth unemployment is running high. I think it's like 20% right now for youth unemployment. Let's assume, because there is a truth to the idea that the government is subsidizing immigration, and it makes it cheaper for the company to hire these people, so they're not hiring native Canadians. There's truth to that, but that's not the whole truth. Remember what I said about absolutes at the beginning of this diatribe? Which is all over the place, I admit, but it's going to have to be. Hopefully I can bring it all together by the time it's over with. Assuming that youth unemployment is 20%, and assuming some of the statistics that I've read over the last couple days, that 65% of the workforce that's under the age of 30 is foreign-born. If we kick out all the foreign-born people and then we fully employ the 20% that are unemployed, assuming, and we're making a big assumption here, that they're all white Europeans or they're all Native American, and we employ them all and assume that they're all employable, we still have a massive, huge labor shortfall. And okay, That's a choice you can make. You can have that labor shortfall. But in order to do it, you have to completely reorganize society, because right now, it needs to be understood that fewer and fewer, where'd that animation go? I lost it. Here it is. There's fewer and fewer young people to prop up the weight of this demographic problem, which is why we have immigration. We need more young people coming in, and we can only get those young people from the places where they're available. The entire world over has the same problem. The only place we can get young people from are the Arab world, India, and Africa, because young people are running out in all the other places. Now, it's not quite that simple. Mexico has a lot of young. Areas of Latin America have a lot of young, but the Americans are drawing those people to them, right? We're all shopping to prop up the demographic problem, to prop up the boomer generation and all the entitlements. We're all shopping from a shrinking pool of young people. So, if you want to kick out all the foreign-born people in Canada, you're going to shrink the population to maybe 25 million. Maybe. Which means you're going to have to completely reorganize society. As I was driving around yesterday, I passed by a road crew. The road crew had, it was actually proportional. It was 1/4 black as night, 1/4 East Indian, 1/4 Native American, and 1/4 white. And the white guys were all old. It's not to say there aren't white, young, working-age people in the workforce. They are. They're employed. They're out there. Some of them are unemployed for sure. There is discrimination. I'm not trying to get away from all this. Remember what I said about absolutes. These are all factors that fit together. But if you want to go to zero immigration and you want to deport everybody, all the engineers, all the other, all the skilled people, you have to reorganize society, because there won't be enough people to pave all the roads. There won't be enough people to keep all the lights on. There won't be enough people to serve you at your restaurants. There won't be enough people to operate all of the various business. You walk into a Best Buy anywhere in Canada, it's East Indians. They're everywhere. The reason they're everywhere is they're filling staffing shortages because there aren't enough young people. I'm not making an excuse for it. I'm saying that that's the reality of it. We stopped making babies 30, 40, 50 years ago, and we make even less babies today than we did back then. Having a child today is great. You should do it. Best experience you're ever going to have in your life. Part of the problem that we went through, or we've gone through, is myth number one is that children are expensive in Canada. They're not. They're not. I'm not a rich man. You can make it work, especially if you vote with your feet. If you're really interested in having a family, find a cheap place to live in Canada. There's plenty of them. Saskatchewan's one of them. There's areas out east. There's all kinds of areas in Canada where things are cheaper. You just have to be willing to go to them. You're not going to be able to do it in the GTA. You're not going to be able to do it in Vancouver because of absolute piss-poor government management of the housing supply, of the immigration system, of everything else. So you can go to zero immigration and you can do mass deportations, but you absolutely have to restructure the entire society, and you have to deliver the message as a politician that living standards are going to go down for a while, that there's going to be hard times, not like Mark Carney hard times. Like, we're talking about whole towns having to be shut down and people being concentrated in different areas of the country so that they can maintain services because of the absolute lack of the working age workforce. Like, it does all come down to the lack of production of babies. And politicians are weak. They're not going to deliver that message. They're not going to go and tell, like, for instance, they're not going to go out and they're not going to tell the 65 plus or the 55 plus age group that you don't get your pensions. We have to cut your old age security or your old age pension by 50%. 50% of the healthcare system is going to have to be privatized. You're not going to be covered. If you get sick, half of you are going to be left to die. That's kind of the message, right? What politician's going to sell that? What boomer's going to vote for that? Some might, because they're more concerned for the future than they are for themselves. The ones with children might actually go that way. But there's a whole pile of people who wouldn't even dare, because they're only thinking about themselves and their own welfare. In a sense, pretending that they're going to live forever. It's a big problem. This is a big problem. Now, this demography at the bottom, where it actually, we're looking at the working age people coming up, most of that, or the vast majority of that, is going to become foreign born. And part of that reason is we're not being efficient with our immigration system. Mass immigration's bad. There's no doubt in my mind that there's a whole pile of people who want to come into this country and would be willing to speak our language, would be willing to learn about our norms. There would be nothing racist about putting a requirement on people that they have to speak the language, they have to understand the laws, they have to know how to use toilets, they have to adopt our cultural practices and obey our laws. We just have, concurrent with all of this that I'm talking about, we also have this woke mind virus nonsense going on, which is, at this time, at this stage of history, is so destructive, because what little family value we have left and what little common sense we have left, it is absolutely being destroyed by this nonsense. So the idea that if you put standards on people coming into the country, it's racist and it's too much of a burden for them to bear, and it's wrong, is the worst kind of thinking we could have right now. Because while it seems, in order to maintain some kind of semblance of society and balance, we have to have some form of immigration, these idiots don't want to put standards on it. So they're bringing in too much. So we're literally flooding out the quality of our country. We're destroying the place. We're burying Canada. We're burying the greatness of the West, the best civilization the world has ever produced. We're burying it, and we're doing it to support the temporary entitlements of the heavy topside demographics of the old stock population that stopped having kids in the first place. These are not simple problems. You can't just turn off the taps and think that society is just going to go magically on. Here's another way to look at it. How much of the native-born population, how much of the white population, how much of anybody that's been here, how much of it is actually capable of working? Psychologically shattered, weakened by a public education system that has fed them nothing but want of entitlement, doesn't leave them ready for the real world. How many of them are obese? How many of them have no skills? How many of them don't even know how to pump gas? There's a significant portion. It's not like they're all clear-cut, muscular, ready-to-go specimens of human greatness. There's a diversity of skill set and capabilities. So even if you achieved full employment and you got everybody doing, even if it was a perfect world where everybody was capable of everything, you're still short. You can't keep the wheels on the bus. And we're under this system where politicians have to get elected. And who elects politicians? Again, refer to the demography. The most important group of voters is still the boomer. They vote in the highest numbers. The younger you get, the more checked out the population is, which doesn't make any sense. Like the people with the greatest burden of labor, the people with the greatest burden of taxation, the people with the greatest stake in the future vote in the least amount of numbers. Like it's like an onion, and I'm glad I did it. I'm doing this way because it's a cluster mug. The whole situation's a cluster mug. So anybody that tells you that there's a one-size-fits-all solution that doesn't lead to societal dissolution is wrong. If you deport every single person that's a first-generation Canadian, you get societal dissolution. If we keep going with mass immigration and grow the population to 60 million in the name of carrying on the entitlements, we get dissolution. it creates the fertile field of further ethnic conflict. It's not just white versus minority. Chinese aren't very fond of Africans. Chinese aren't very fond of East Indians. The conflict is between those races as well. That's another thing. In-group preference. So I don't have a problem with in-group preference. It tends to be that the races stick to themselves. The melting pot is a limited idea. It's kind of an edge case where there's intermarriage and there's intermingling. In general, people clump up in the cities. So your Eritreans are in one spot, your Chinese are in another spot, your Arabs conglomerate in one spot, your East Indians. There's conglomeration, and then there's colonization that goes out into the small towns and boroughs. But it's clumping. People stick to their own. The hiring practices of, and you can viscerally see this. Remember that Best Bite point that I made earlier? You walk into a Best Bite, it's nothing but East Indians. A restaurant I walked into in my little survey of things, it's all East Indians that are working there. Many of the Chinese food places that you can go into, it's all Chinese. They don't hire outside their race. Now, we're doing all this diversity stuff in this country, making the majority population make sure that they abide by race quotas, but the minority population doesn't have to do that. So they only hire their own. I'm not an advocate of our current immigration numbers. I'm not an advocate of mass immigration. I think the country is going to hell in a handbasket because we're haphazardly going about something to politically satisfy politicians who don't want to deliver the bad news to the population and to politically satisfy the 2/3 who vote liberal, who their entitlements are everything to them and they don't care how those checks keep coming in. They will destroy the next generation if it means they get one more pension check. And that's not all of you. That's not all the boomers. But that's kind of the attitude. They don't care what burden they leave. A lot of them didn't even have kids, so what stake do they have in the future in the first place? And again, I know I keep repeating this, but it's not everybody. I'm talking about the general problem that we face. What I think we need, realistically, we do need deportations. The TFWs need to go. We need to put standards on immigration, language standards, conduct standards, expectations. We need to drop a list of what we want as a nation, what we need as a nation, and apply it to everybody that wants in. And put those people on a short leash so that we make sure that we get good Canadian participants. We get good Western participants. People who want to come in and adopt what we have, not come in and bring their problems. Khalistanis with their separation issues, with our religious fundamentalist issues, with the kinds of hate and supremacy that are, and we're not talking white supremacy, we're talking about Arab supremacy, Khalistani supremacy, running rampant on our streets, criminal networks, funneling money into terrorism. These, like all of these things that we've been covering on this channel often lead right back to the immigration system. The cartelism, the terrorist financing, the money laundering. It's because we're wide open, and why we're wide open is politicians need votes. They don't want to deliver the bad news. There's a whole pile of people who don't give a damn about the future. They only care about today, in the government, in the bureaucracy, in society. This is why the zero immigration crowd is wrong. They don't get it. They don't get the acute nature of the demographic crisis. They don't understand that it's not as simple as stopping immigration and deporting everybody, society would collapse. It's that simple. The mass immigration crowds are going to destroy everything for my children. They're going to leave this country fragmented and colonized with ethnic tension everywhere we turn. A world that's as unnavigable as the one that would be created by the zero immigration crowd. There's a middle road, a middle path, but it involves politicians actually delivering a degree of bad news to the population, actually putting some thought into things and making stiff requirements when it comes to who comes in, so that we can maybe stabilize things for the next 10 or 20 years, because that's how long it takes. You have a child, and they're 20 years before, at a minimum, before they hit the workforce. Now, I suppose they can be doing cheap menial jobs at 16, for sure. You can do it, but even 16 years. But the highly skilled jobs, they got to go through apprenticeships, they got to go through school, they got to do all this stuff, they got to have the will. There's no immediate solution. So I'll even admit that to a degree, when I say how many kids you have, I'm wrong. To a degree, because you can't go back 30 years and start generating children. You can only start from here. But if genuinely you concern about the plight, you are concerned about the plight of the white European in Canada, the best thing you can do is have children and accept that in order to maintain a stable society, there's going to be a degree of immigration. This isn't Poland. This isn't Germany in the 1930s. We don't have the demographics. This country is not the same. Most of the people, most of the ethno-nationalists have no stake in the future. They have no kids. Literally the most important thing you could do is have children. That's the baseline. And then you still, if you start producing babies today, everybody starts producing babies out the wazoo. They're already heavily subsidized, by the way. There's tax credits everywhere for children. Tens of thousands of dollars a year. If you're a family of four and you're below like $100,000 in income, the federal government's kicking you subsidies for your children. It's a scale, it's a diminishing scale, but it's there. Like if you're a family of four and you're working at Tim Hortons, if you can get a Tim Hortons job because of all the TFWs, like the TFW program is bad. It's flat out bad. The hotels are filled with, right around here, this is the thing that people need to understand. Every small town I go to has the exact same thing. The hotel rooms are filled with TFWs. Not people who are getting citizenship, but people who are there to work the cheap jobs. Yeah, they're subsidized because, again, we're competing with the rest of the world for young people to do the jobs, to pour your coffee, to make your burgers, to do your sandwiches, to stock your store shelves, to drive your taxis, to drive your Ubers, to drive your trucks. There's a lot of people who aren't going to like that. There ain't enough young people. If you're worried about stabilizing the white population, you have to have babies, but you have to contend with the next 2 decades of time until you start seeing returns on that. There's literally no excuse for not having children, except for the fact we've embraced hedonism, which these groups, the East Indians, and these other groups have not embraced the hedonism. They don't do the woke nonsense. The Arabs, they're not doing it. They're just banging out children. They're having families. They're staying married. They don't teach it in their schools. They don't teach it in their religious institutions. That's us. It's the suicide that we're engaged in, collective. So you have this third wave or fourth wave feminism that men are rightly afraid of settling down. I don't know what to say. You got to find a good one. Like you have to. It's really bad. There's a lot of interwoven long-term problems that are all leading us down a road towards losing everything. Now, I don't think it's too late to reverse the trend and stabilize things, but we still have to navigate 2 decades that are going to be very dicey no matter how you cut it. And that's if you can get everybody on board towards that solution, and you can't. You can't. Unity is ephemeral because we're not even being honest with ourselves. Everybody is gathered around talking points. Zero immigration will solve everything. Mass immigration will solve everything. Woke ideology will solve everything. Anti-woke ideology will solve everything. The solution to stabilizing things takes elements from each of these various talking points and marries them all together in a thoughtful, cohesive whole and moves through the next decade or two, which is going to be rocky no matter what we do. And on the far end of it, we achieve some sort of stability. But it's not going to look like the world of the 1920s or the 1930s or the 1940s or the 1950s. Because we left that world behind when we stopped having babies. You can maintain the legacy of that world if you start planning for it now. But the fact is, the damage was already done by a lot of the people that are moving up this pyramid. In conclusion, I think there's large segments of Canada, geographic regions, cities in the main. I think you can say the same thing in North America. I think you can say the same thing in Europe, where the people are not going to be honest with themselves until it's too late or ever. Which is why I think independence, autonomy for the Western provinces, and maybe this is something that people in other nations need to consider too. Independence, autonomy, sovereignty is a form of triage where the pieces that can save themselves to come together around an actual plan that can navigate the next 2 decades successfully. Places where the demographics are a little better. I've said before, I specifically moved to a region of Saskatchewan where there were a lot of young people, a lot of baby bumps. It's something you should consider too. It's really funny because where all the baby bumps are is where the housing is cheapest. There's a secret there. But if we can come together in these areas where people might be intelligent enough, might be in touch enough to actually put together the kinds of solutions that I talked about in this video, which is a rational immigration system, not a panicked immigration system, immigration system based on requirements, based on stringent requirements, a society that divorces itself from the bad influences of Toronto-centric or Ottawa-centric thinking. Basically, we have to perform the triage. That's why we need to break up. Because if we keep going down the road that our governments are leading us down, in 10 or 20 years, we're going to have a lot of conflict and a lot of problems and instability, and it's going to be far worse. We're halfway through we are 50, 60% of the way through the demographic crisis if we reverse the tide now. But we can only reverse that tide in certain locations because the will to reverse the tide or even acknowledge that there's a problem doesn't exist in many places. And there's nothing we can do about it. We can childlessly rant and rave all we want about mass immigration in downtown Toronto. The game is already lost. The places that can still survive, the places that can still save themselves, should rapidly seek to do so. And that's what I hope to see. I'm Frank Vaughn. If you like the work, please consider supporting it via the website. I'll see you in the next one. I might actually see you later tonight.